This is the second of two videos on Mitchie's Proverb 12, the hit and split, which is also known as the tempo play. I went through in the last video a number of commentators and their examples of the tempo hit, and I'm just going to do two more that I found probably the most thorough. One is Dan Rivera, who does those Backgammon, his beautiful short YouTube videos that are very helpful, and he does a lesson on tempo plays, which if you look up tempo plays Backgammon is beautiful, you'll find it. And he just gives four positions, which I'm going to go through very quickly now. The first is in this situation here, where if you look at it, where white as usual, bearing into the bottom right, black is in a very strong position. They have, 12 checkers in the zone. There's a huge opportunity for them to extend their prime. I think 15 rows there is going to extend their prime, almost half of the rows. And even other rows are going to make good inner board points. So we're penned in on the 24 point, and we don't want to be trapped any further. So a passive play, I have to admit, looking at this, before I kind of study tempo hits, I'd probably have played safely. I'd have used the 5 to bring one down to the 13 point and played 6 to 5 for a bit of diversity, flexibility there. But a passive play like that means we're just going to get trapped in further at the back. So instead of that, what we have to do is we split at the back because we want to try and get our back checkers moving before black can get any further established. As I said, they're so strong looking there, and we have to slow them up. So we take a chance with the 5 and we hit them at the back. And even if we're hit back, we've got ammunition. We'll have more material at the back to try and fight them. We've got to stop and try and get ourselves out of there. I mean, we're not favourites, but if we just let ourselves get penned into the back, we're absolutely screwed. So we've just got to do that. And anything else, as you can see, is a blunder. The second position Dan Rivera gives is this situation here where we're, again, under a serious threat. And obviously, if you look on the bottom left there, our lone white checker, we can bring that to safety with the 3. But what do you do with the 5? You could bring another one down, but we've got a really stacked, rigid position that's no good. And also, up the top, you can see that black is really threatening to make our 5 point on our head, and the 10 rolls will do that, and can also hit our blot in the 11 point if we don't move it with more rolls. So the tempo play here is about damage limitation, a distraction move, Dan Rivera calls it. So with the 5, we won't bring it down to the midfield. We won't run it at the back. Instead, we're just going to hit black's checker and again just buy ourselves time. And hopefully we could make an advanced anchor in while they waste time. And even if we're hit, it'll improve our chances of an advanced anchor. And that's why the tempo play is right. The third position he shows is this one. A really nasty roll. There's nothing good about this roll. But again, if you look at it, black has 11 checkers in the zone. Threatening to make the 5 point, could make the 3 point on our head. There's 21 rolls there will make either the 5 point or the 3 point. So black is very, very strong here. And we really need to take away half their roll. And as you remember from the last video, a lot of the point of the tempo hit is to take away half their roll. So we might as well safeten up that checker in the bottom left, or the checker at 9 points. We'll bring that forward. But rather than bringing another checker down with the 5, we hit and just buy ourselves some time. And finally, Dan Rivera gives a position where he says, look, don't forget that you don't have to do a tempo roll just because you can. And if the hit is unnecessary, don't do it. If you look at this situation, black is strong, is really powerful, but they're unlikely to get much stronger. Plus, we have only got one checker back, and the great advantage always with one checker back, they can always be quite elusive and escape. So even if black were to make their bar point or their 4 point, there's still hope that we can escape. The race is very close, so we don't we've no need for desperation here. And the positioning, even though they have 11 checkers in the zone, the positioning isn't actually that threatening because we've only got that one checker back. So the hit is unnecessary here, and all we have to do is just to a safe play, bring one down from the 13 point, and then move our back checker further forward. So Dan Rivera's big point is you need to count your opponent's rolls, work out what are we actually trying to prevent, And if there are not many rolls that improve the position, then the tempo roll is probably not correct. Um, Now, and I said in this situation, there aren't many rolls where black hugely improves and that our single white checker can't leapfrog them. So we just come down to the middle and push forward a little bit at the back. Now, the other great analyst that I found really, really helpful when it came to tempo rolls was Dirk Sheeman in his book To Hit or Not to Hit. Um, he's so thorough. He's actually so thorough that I can only give you a few of the many positions that he's done with. But he's a whole chapter of the tempo hit. It's a I found it really, really helpful. And I'm just going to give you some of his kind of major points. I suppose his first thing is that the more numbers your opponent has to attack your back checkers with, the more important it becomes to make the tempo hit. So he starts off with kind of, again, a fairly traditional position that Chris Bray had mentioned had come up with this position in the last video. And if you look at this here, if we were to split with 2 at the back, black's checker on their 9 point is kind of aiming straight at it. So for that reason, a tempo hit is right. However, if we were to take black's checker on their 9 point and just move it back 1 pip to their 10 point, now if we split with a 2 at the back, it's going to take them 2 rolls to hit us. They could still hit us, but they're far less threatening. And for this reason, at this stage, then, the tempo roll, it really isn't that. It's a toss up between whether you play the tempo roll or not. The other thing Dirk Sheeman says about this position is that the tempo hit, he's very interesting about this. He says 2 checkers are called connected when they're separated by 6 or fewer pips. So we're going to disconnect our opponent's checker. If we can disconnect our opponent's back checkers, it makes the tempo hit more attractive. So it takes that position which you have, and if you look down the bottom, in the middle at the bottom there, black has advanced one of their checkers 6, with a 6. So they're on our bar point. They're the bottom middle, that single black checker. If that checker wasn't there, if it was back on their 4 point, we're not disconnecting them. If we hit at the back, if we use the 5 to hit their checker on their 1 point, they can still come off the bar and connect with their other checker. So we're not disconnecting their checkers. And for that reason, then, if you look at it, it's quite a significant error to hit. And it's funny, it struck me as funny that it wasn't just a threat at the top of the board threatening our checkers. It was the fact that the disconnection, the effect of the tempo hit to disconnect our opponent's checkers at the bottom of the board, that makes such a difference to the PR. Really interesting point from Dirk Sheeman, and he's the only analyst who does this. He says, well, what happens after the tempo hit? So say we've done a tempo hit, and we've left a loose blot in our home board, and our opponent misses us. In the olden days, they used to say, well, look, that blot is out of play. It's too far advanced. You should just leave it there. But Dirk Sheeman is at pains to point out that nowadays, with the computer analysis, no, it is definitely clear that if you leave a blot in your ace point, try and cover it as soon as possible. So here's an example where we did a tempo hit. Black came out with 4 and didn't get a roll of 1, so it didn't hit us. So this is after the tempo hit. How do you play a 5 and a 2? And I said you'd be tempted to say, well, look, that white checker on our 1 point is really out of the game. So why would you waste anything further? And you could maybe use your 5 to bring another checker into the zone. And, well, the 2 surely is nice and safe. I have to admit, before I read Dirk Sheeman, I'd use the 2 to safely give us a little butterfly anchor at the back there and just be nice and tidy. But no, Dirk Sheeman says very clear, you use the 5, you cover that blot, and then, instantly, the options with the 2 become far more interesting. And the correct option with the 2 is actually, let's hit. Dirk Sheeman talks a lot about momentum. And, we're suddenly on the attack a little bit. So while we've got black under pressure, let's hit them again. So rather than doing what I do and moving creating that little anchor at the back, put that back there instead. We hit from 6 to 4 and keep the momentum going in our favor. And it's not a huge error if you were to do what I wanted to do. But if you can see, it's quite a big error, the third choice there, if you don't cover the blot that we made with the tempo hit. Next section, Dirk Sheeman talks about, well, does the tempo hit offer you a better chance to make an advanced anchor? So in this situation, when we roll a 6 and a 4, but obviously the 4 has to come out there, we could push it forward, push that our checker that just came out forward and run it another 6 points. But now if you look, we haven't done anything in our opponents on board. We're starting to get penned in there again. And so rather than pushing it forward like that, our better option is or even randomly pushing another checker forward like that. You could even there's so many options with the 6, but the best option is to hit the tempo hit, because if we are, one or two things is going to happen. One, we'll be hit, in which case we've got more ammunition to try and make an advanced anchor in our opponent's home board, or two, we'll be missed, in which case our opponent can't really, unless they roll doublets, they're not going to make an anchor, a point in their home board themselves, and it gives us a chance of maybe rolling a 3 the next go and making an anchor. Now, another really interesting thing that I've only come across Dirk Sheeman saying this, we need to look at, does the tempo hit match our game plan? So in this situation here, we roll a 6 and a 5. We have to come in with the 5. What do we do with the 6? We could tempo hit. We could play from 8 to 2 and hit black's checker on our 2 point like that. Now, I have to admit, I look at that and think, sheesh, that's an awful lot of blots lying around the place. That can't be right. And it's not right. But Dirk Sheeman's point is, it's not right because we've been kind of so many loose blots around. He said it's not right because we were in a priming situation. And when we were, we've suddenly thrown a checker forward and in a position that would be more likely to be blitzing. So if we're priming, we're better off just running our back checkers. Now, as I've said earlier in the video, we're not in a great position. We're favourites to lose here. But if there are, I think is it a 1, a 5, and a 6? If black rolls 1s and 5s and 6s, well then they're not hitting us, and we could actually continue to make a bit of a prime, because our game plan was priming. We don't tempo hit, and to hit tempo hit, as you see there, is a blunder. However, that was the position we looked at. If you look down the bottom, if instead of having those 2 blots there, we popped them up and stacked up those points, we're now in much more of a priming structure here we have here now. So, as of a blitzing structure, we're in much more of a blitzing structure here now. And with blitzing, we want to hit. We've got the stacked points, so we want to hit. So when we come in with the 5, the correct move now is to hit because we're blitzing. And I just thought it was interesting. Dirk Sheeman said this. No other analyst said this. We need to look at just how does the tempo hit match our game plan, and if we're blitzing, we hit. Another point Dirk Sheeman just said is the more numbers your opponent has to attack your back checkers, the more important it's become to make the tempo hit. I suppose that goes back to the avalanche. Talking in the last video, someone talking about an avalanche of checkers waiting to land in your head. So he gives this position. I just thought in interesting comparison positions. If you look at black attacking us, it's early days. They've rolled out. They've made their bar point, and they've obviously rolled a 6-1 and then a 6-5, and we must have started with a 3-2, and we're deciding what to do next. And we rolled a 5 and a 2. Black's structure at the top there of the board, it's not actually that flexible. They might be able to make a point, with a 3-2 or something like that, but there'll be gaps in their structure. They're not particularly, even though they've got that kind of 3 prime, they're not that threatening in the next roll. So there's no need. Obviously, the 2 is going to come down from the 13 to the 11, make that point. But we don't need to hit. We can just bring another checker down, and the tempo hit, as you see there, is a bit of an error. However, if we look at black's position here, if we took one more checker from their 13 point and moved it onto the 8 point, and took one checker from the stack of 5 and their 6 point and moved it back onto 7 point, so their position looks like this. Now they've lots of combinations that'll hit us, or could make a prime, or just this huge flexibility. And now we're much more under threat. So this time when we'll make the 11 point, but this time we want to hit them with the tempo hit 6-1, because if we don't, they'll be doing so many good things in the next roll. The final, I suppose, thing from Dirk Sheeman, he just looks at, well, does the tempo hit? I'm not sure actually his final. There's a couple more things from Dirk Sheeman, but he asked, does the tempo hit create more bad rolls for our opponent? Now, this I found, Dirk Sheeman is a super grandmaster. He's one of 2 super grandmasters in the world, and he is dealing at a level that's probably way above my pay grade here. But let's just look at what he says. If you're 6-1, well, obviously you can play a 6-1 out from the bar like that, or you can play one down to 13, or you can even hit. And he looks at it and he says, well, look, if you look at sixes, if our opponent comes in off the bar here, they have no good sixes. So that's why the tempo hit is correct. However, if you look at the top left here, that single black blot on their 8 point, if we move that back to the 10 point, now if they were to get a 6, that would allow them to play that checker forward 6 and make their 4 point. And for that reason, 6s play well for them, and we wouldn't hit a tempo hit here. I said Dirk Jim one more thing. He just says tempo hits can be used in the middle game too. So we've advanced the game a little bit, and we're in this position here now, and we have a 4 and a 3 to roll. We have only the 1 checker, so we are at risk. We're up against 11 checkers in the zone, but we might be able to escape. And you might be forgiven to saying, well, the obvious 4-3 is to make another point in our home board and strengthen up our home board. But black has a blot in their home board, and this is something that I think it was Paul McGreal said in the last. I was talking about in the last video as well. When your opponent has a blot in the home board, we're going to try and hit that blot. And if we don't make a tempo hit, black has a 2 or or 5s or what's that, an 8 will cover that blot in the next go. So we're kind of, we don't want to we want to have a go at trying to hitting that black blot in their home board that's with a 1. So instead of playing the safer play, look at the pile of 3 checkers in our 8 point. We're going to make one of them in 4 and on 1, make the tempo hit. And this way, if we might get really lucky, black might dance with a 6 and a 5 or something. But if not, they will find it harder to cover. Now that if they want to cover that blot in their home board, they're going to have to leave us shots elsewhere. So they're very much more likely to leave us a shot elsewhere, and that's why that's the right move. Finally, if I don't know what that position. Oh, just saying, if they didn't have the blot in their home board, if they hadn't slotted the point in their home board, well then it's not. We play the safe move. There's nothing to be gained by playing a tempo hit. Finally, just a few notes for myself at the end of kind of 2 videos and a lot of study, and I think I've read about 8 books on tempo hits at this stage. And this is the conclusion I've come to. When we are thinking about whether we should make a tempo hit or not, the more numbers our opponent has that's attacking our back checkers. McGreal and Walter Trice call it when we're under the gun. And I think it was Chris Bray talking about facing an avalanche of threats. The more threatened we are, the more likely we should do a tempo hit. Also, if our opponent's position is threatening to become much stronger in the next go, we want to stop them becoming stronger, so we do the tempo hit now and stop that risk of them improving. We should make a tempo hit. If our opponent is split to our bar point, so therefore the big attraction, as I said in this video, if the opponent is split to our bar point and we hit them, do a tempo hit, we've disconnected their 2 back checkers. The one's in the bar, one's more than 6 points away on their bar point. I hope that makes sense, but you can look at early on, I think it was the point Dirk Sheeman made about connectivity. If they split their bar point rather than their 5 point or our 5 point or something like that, we should tempo hit. And also, if they've slotted and left a blot in their inner board, there's much more to be gained from tempo hitting. And the flip side of this, we should be less inclined to make a tempo hit. And this is the big thing. If there's something else constructive we can do, we don't need to tempo hit. So if there's something else on, we're probably not going to tempo hit anyway. And as Dan Rivera said in one of the earlier parts of this video, if your opponent's position is not threatening to become drastically stronger than it already is, well, there's no need to tempo hit. That's it. Another very long video. I'm sorry We move on from, that's the 12 beginners proverbs in the opening section of opening concepts. We'll move on to chapter 2 in the next video.